And good evening, everyone. It is the 7th of December 2013. It's 7 p.m. in the UK, 2 p.m. Eastern. Hello, everyone in the world, wherever you're watching. This is TwL with Logic, a weekly Skeptic show broadcasting here on Google Hangouts to you. Just to note, you can call in at any time at the Skype contact TwL with Logic to your Skype and just send me a quick PM with a gist of your question, and we'll add you into the conversation in due course. And also, please mute your stream if you do get in, because you'll just get an echo and it'll just confuse everyone on the panel. Also, if you call in, you grant us permission to use your likeness, because the show is recorded and uploaded later. So please, no funny stuff with the DMCAs. And finally, as a copyright disclaimer, this show and the recording is public domain, so you are completely free to share it and distribute it in part or whole. All we ask is, as a nice little courtesy, please link back to us. And I think that's all the announcements done. And we'll just quickly go around the panel. And welcoming back Sheila. How are you doing?
Hey, Cal. I'm doing great, thank you.
And back after another long break, Casey. Welcome back to the show.
Glad to be here.
Okay, and so we'll just get on to introducing our special guest tonight. She is a TED Fellow, a graphic artist who works predominantly in English language manga. She's well known for her Legend of Zatar series. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Can everyone please welcome promoter of skepticism and critical thinking through the medium of manga, Sarah Mayhew. Welcome to the show, Sarah.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you. I don't know who's Sheila. You're usually the best for the introductory questions, so I'll hand over to you.
All right. I guess we'll start with the most obvious one. How did you get interested in drawing manga? What drew you into that line? Just basic interest in manga itself, or was there something else that brought you into it?
I've always been interested in storytelling, and I've always had an inclination for drawing. And I would say it was when I was in high school that anime, which is manga's animated counterpart, started becoming more mainstream in North America. So it was around, and I saw this style, and it became appealing to me as an artist, of something, just a style to try that was unique and sort of really spoke to me. So I actually got into watching anime and reading manga because I wanted to sort of study it and learn how to draw it myself and learn about how it tells stories. Which is kind of backwards. Usually anime manga fans, if they happen to have any drawing talents, start into making manga by drawing fan art. So I kind of did the opposite. I wanted to draw manga, so I started watching anime to teach myself.
Oh yeah, speaking of anime, I think this might interest you. The Funimation Studios is actually not that far from where I live, because it's just in Flower Mound. In fact, I used to always drive past it when I was going to high school, back when I lived in Flower Mound.
Cool.
Right, yeah. There was a question that came off that. Obviously, like being a Westerner foreigner getting into manga, I mean, what's the feedback been like, well, from manga's home in Japan to your work? Have they liked it?
Well, the thing about me being a Westerner doing manga comes up a bit. Yeah. Like I noticed in your intro, describing my work as original English language manga, which I don't typically put that sort of extra label on top of my work. Okay. My work, I've always just called it manga, and refer to myself as a mangaka sometimes even. which is basically just, so the Japanese word for manga creator. And there was actually a debate on my Wikipedia page for a while over labeling my work manga versus, original English language, or there's a bunch of other sort of labels that people have tried to come up with, like global manga. For manga that is, I guess, not from Japan or not from Japanese creators, it gets a little bit of a no true Scotsman fallacy, though, of, well, if you're Japanese but you're living in Norway, is what you're doing manga. If you're Italian but you live in Japan, is that manga? So basically, I refer to my work as manga as a practical sort of marketing term, because I know that what I'm doing will appeal to a certain demographic of readers who read manga, as opposed to reading, traditional American comic books like your Marvel, DC, Dark Horse. There's certainly crossover between the North American comic book market, what you would typically call just comic books, and what is referred to as manga.
Okay.
So I just call my work manga, even though I'm not Japanese or living in Japan, because I know that there are people who, when they go into the bookstore, they go to the manga section and they're looking for a sort of spectrum of comic book that falls into a label of manga. And I don't really see any appeal or any practical use for putting sort of an extra label on top of the word manga, like original English language or global manga, because there really isn't a market for that. There is no market of people who are like, I want to read manga, but only if it doesn't come from Japan. So it's really kind of like a negative label. Like, I think any publishers or creators who put this label on their manga, it's like, well, you're only deterring the few weird people who, kind of have this snobbery about only reading manga from Japan. So why would you draw their attention to that fact? Otherwise, I think most readers don't care. They're just looking for this sort of spectrum of attributes that does make it different from your more traditional comic books. So that's basically the only major problem that I've had being a Western artist creating manga.
Okay. Casey, you had a question there.
Yes. All right. I have this one question about this one certain manga. No, it's not none of those ones like Fairy Tail or One Piece. It's this one unorthodox one. Have you ever heard of the... Oh yeah, it's called the Bible manga. It's popular in the Philippines. Basically, it shows anime Jesus at the front. Actually, manga Jesus at the front. I was wondering, since you're a manga artist and all, did you ever know about that?
No, but one thing that I have noticed about manga is, it seems that if there's any kind of fandom, and I don't know if you want to call the Bible a fandom, but I guess it's an old one. I guess that's where canon comes from originally. But I've found that with manga, there's so many fandoms that sort of manga eyes their fandom. I've seen, a lot of Harry Potter manga style fan art and fan fiction, and everything from like I remember coming across manga fan art for CBS's The Mentalist, which I thought was a little like off the beaten track as far as like manga fans go. Like I can totally see why, you know, some manga fans would cross over to like Harry Potter or Doctor Who. But I was like, wow, The Mentalist too? Like that seems that's cool. So like I think anything that people can like have a passion for or be a fan of, like there's a manga version, like they have been drawn as manga characters as well, because you really see everything, like the Sherlock fandom, whether it's the Robert Downey Jr. movies or my favorite, the BBC Cumberbatch version. Like you just, like any fandom, you're gonna find manga fan art for. So it doesn't surprise me.
Okay.
Has any of your stuff been? Have you done anything in Japanese, or has any of your stuff been translated into Japanese to kind of expand the audience a little bit?
No, not yet. I've done, when I was first working on Secrets of Sorcerers, my first graphic novel, back when it was just a webcomic, I did have it translated into Spanish from a Spanish friend who was interested in translating that for me. So he just did that on his own, and I just provided him with the blank artwork pages, and so like that would be right now the way for me to go so far is I'm working on publishing in English in print, but if there's like any fans out there who would want to translate into Japanese for me, and I would create a Japanese site for Legend of the Star, that would be something that I would be totally into, because definitely it would be great to make Legend of the Star available to Japanese fans. Right. But right now it would be sort of thing where it would have to be a kind-hearted fan that knows English and Japanese, and I would totally provide the blank artwork and everything and make a Japanese webcomic.
Right.
But
sorry, I don't know if you can hear me, but I have no audio.
We can hear you, Marty. Okay, I
also
don't know.
hear a bunch of like.
Yeah, I think that's his birds that we can hear. We can't hear them.
Just like shuffling around. Yeah. I think like there's a groundskeeper in the back.
Okay, we'll just carry on while Mortimer tries to sort himself out. I was wanted to ask you, what were the mangas that really inspired you at the start? Is there any ones in particular that really kind of gave you that spark to go? Like, is there any ones you really remember standing out?
Yeah, one of my very favorite anime was called Fushigi Yugi, which is what you would refer to as a shoujo series. Shoujo meaning like for girls. But it was sort of aimed at older teenage girls, and at the time it was the first manga that I had seen that dealt with like more mature subject matter. And what I loved about Fushigi Yugi, besides what first drew me to it, was its beautiful artwork, was that it had a very girly female heroine who still sort of got the job done in her storyline. So she was kind of the stereotype of like being girly and sometimes kind of helpless and needing saving all the time. But she was the main character. She wasn't secondary to anyone in the plot. And it really sort of brought me out of a kind of like tomboyish phase of my preteens, because I realized, like, oh, hey, like, she's a main character, and she is still smart and funny, and she, you know, tackles the conflicts and problems in the story in her own way. And it sort of made me feel, as a young teen, like, oh, hey, it's okay to be girly and to care about, you know, putting ribbons in your hair and to go gaga over boys and, you know, care about your shoes and clothes. But when it came time for her to kick ass, she kicked ass. Right. So that's something that really appealed to me in these types of shoujo heroine stories, where in American comic books I find there are lots of female heroines, but they tend to be quite masculine. They tend to be sort of male characters that are just in a female body and don't really appeal to women like me who do like girly things, who like, you know, squeeing over a new pair of shoes and, you know, putting glitter moisturizer on your arms and like all these girly things that sort of American culture taught me. Well, no, those girly things mean that you're like the princess that needs to be saved, or that you're not smart. That the smart women, you know, wear frumpy things and glasses, or they wear leather cat suits and are super not emotional. Right. So that was definitely something about falling into watching anime, because I wanted to learn how to draw. It was discovering shows like Fushigi Yugi, like Nana, which is another great series for young women that really show more realistic portrayals of women who are very feminine.
Does being interested in the more feminine characters like that, does that bring you some flack from feminists?
I'm not sure. I think it would be hard for them. I mean, I definitely get flack from feminists all the time for being an actual skeptic instead of like just sort of piggybacking on skepticism with, you know, feminism. I actually, you know, am interested in skepticism, so I'll get flack for criticizing some of their, you know, claims from their ideology. But I think it would be hard for them to argue. I mean, there's certainly the argument that a lot of anime does not have good role models for women. I mean, there are tons of very unrealistic portrayals of women's bodies in comics and anime. And then anime has the unique reverse of the, you know, in comic books you have these unrealistic proportions, which anime will have too. But then they go totally to the more creepy side of having women who look like children, and that's definitely not very good either. But I do find that manga and anime does have that sort of sweet spot where they present feminine characters in a spotlight, which I think a lot of American entertainment, you know, the feminine character is the damsel in distress or the girlfriend character. And if you have a female lead, they're very masculine and hardened and not really into girly things. So I think that's something that is a very feminist ideal, to show that it doesn't matter how masculine or feminine anyone is. It's their actions that matter. So yeah, that's one of the things that I really like about manga is sort of this freedom to have feminine female characters, and also there's a freedom to have more feminine male characters as well.
Okay, Casey, you've got a question?
Yes. So, now that we know about your interest in mangas, I would like. Would you like to tell us how you got interested in skepticism?
Yeah, I've always been interested in science as long as I can remember, but never sort of did well in my schooling in the sciences. I was always, you know, the art student, the English student in school. But a lot of my friends, I had a lot of guy friends in high school, and they were very into science and math. So I sort of got used to being like the artist of our group that had an interest in science, but I kind of sort of got used to deferring to like the experts around me. So I think I grew up with kind of this this getting used to being wrong about things. Like, I have the attitude that, like, I just assume that I'm probably wrong about what I'm thinking, and I should find out, you know, I should correct myself. So this really, like, followed me into college, and came across the movie What the Bleep Do We Know, which is really, like, really bad, like, full of woo and, like, quantum nonsense. But I didn't know any better, being, you know, a graphic artist. And when I came across that movie, I really wanted to talk about it with my science buddies from high school who had gone on, you know, one had gone into theoretical physics. So I was, like, all pumped up to talk about, you know, this movie with him. And knowing this guy, like, he must have been, like, a born scientist, because, like, whenever you asked him any questions, he never gave you a straight answer. He was always, like, weighing, like, the pros and cons, or, you know, well, you can't definitely say this way or that way because, you know, here's the evidence over here, but and so, like, you'd never get a straight answer out of this guy, like, ever, about anything. And so I was all excited, you know, when we were meeting up, a bunch of us, for coffee, get together, and I was like, oh, you gotta talk to me about this movie, What the Bleep Do We Know, and blah, blah, and was, like, about to expect, like, a, you know, conversation about quantum physics, and he looked at me and he said, Sarah, it's complete bullshit. And it was, like, the first time that he just, like, gave me a straight, simple answer, and it hit me like a brick wall, just knowing him personally. I was like, wow, like, a straight answer out of Jason, like, wow, he never, you know, so, like, he must have really meant it. And that stuck with me through into, like, I participated in a program for young entrepreneurs where the administrator happened to also be a part-time Reiki master. So whenever she could, she would sort of involve some, like, New Age stuff into the program. And she had one speaker come in and start talking, and there was a discussion about, like, how science is really starting to catch up with these belief systems about, like, the law of attraction and real astrology, not the stupid newspaper horoscopes, but real, you know, science-based astrology. And then she said, and you can see this with movies like What the Bleep Do We Know? And that rang a bell in my head right away. I'm like, oh my god, everything these people have been saying is complete bullshit. Because I remembered my friend telling me that that movie was bullshit. And so that kind of opened me up to, I guess, being exposed to all these new age people sort of drove me, like, sort of pushed me to the other side of the fence. And I realized, like, oh, wow, there's all of these people who think that science, like, they're using science to be science-y and science-sounding. And as an art student, I didn't really have the tools to tell the difference. But when, you know, that alarm went off and I was like, oh no, they said what the bleep do we know? So what else have they been telling me that is bullshit? So I went online and, you know, I looked up their law of attraction and I looked up their astrology and I sort of fell into this world of skepticism, and I was just blown away by the idea that even though I'm not a scientist or have any, you know, formal science education, that there is this community that could teach me the tools to be able, you know, to distinguish myself, to be able to see those red flags for myself.
Yeah, I think we'll bring in Mortimer there. You've been nodding and
yeah. Yeah, first of all, I apologize for all the noise. Am I coming through?
Yeah, you're coming through.
Yeah, I just rushed setting my computer up to make the show because as those of you who might be regular viewers, you'll notice the background has changed. I have moved now, so but I just set everything up, and I forgot to plug in my speakers, of course, or headphones, of course. So that's what messed everything up. I hear what you're saying, and I'm just nodding along. It's what the bleep is bullshit. It's that simple. I watched it, and I think I should have done a stupid count for that movie. You know, like ring a bell every time someone says something stupid, and it would be ding 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 ding.
Didn't we try to go through that movie?
Yeah, we tried.
Oh,
yeah,
gave
it
up.
was just horrible.
Yeah, it's a horrible.
Yeah, kept cutting out.
I'll probably do something like a commentary for that movie or something.
All right.
But I have a background in physics, by the way.
All right.
So yeah, it's.
Okay. I'll just go right.
Horrible.
So, you have a question, Casey?
Yeah. I was thinking, I was wondering if maybe this idea could perhaps spark a manga, or maybe pretty much a response in general. Alright, you know that show Ancient Aliens?
Yes.
Oh.
Basically, it's what makes History Channel no longer History Channel. Alright.
Pseudo-History Channel.
Yes, the Pseudo-History Channel. Well, you got that right. But, okay, now I was pretty much, alright, at least they're being honest that that they're not being science-y, because they're so, and because they have to revision history so much. But you know what really got me angry? It was when I saw the thing where apparently aliens created dinosaurs and extinct the dinosaurs. And that's what really set me off.
Are you sure you weren't watching the Sci-Fi Channel, Casey?
Are you sure you weren't on some form of a list instance?
I didn't watch it on the Sci-Fi Channel or the History Channel. I watched it on YouTube because I read about. I just looked at the episode guide and then I was like, I think I have to see this.
Because if you want to learn history, YouTube is a more reliable source than the History Channel.
Yes. I mean, I remember on that same episode, they were saying things like humans and dinosaurs apparently exist each other. Yeah, they were going to creation science territory, and well, they even were using hoaxes like like the like the Ica stones, whatever you call them, and also that that imprint on that temple of apparently a stegosaur.
But the dinosaurs didn't go extinct. They're in the hollow moon with the Nazis.
No, they're birds now.
Yeah. I've got 7 dinosaurs myself.
I've always got the dinosaurs constantly making noise whenever I'm trying to sleep in the morning.
The hollow moon Nazis need the dinosaurs to fight the lizard people.
No, their leader is and also Sarah, you are incorrect on that part. Everyone knows that the dinosaur, specifically T-Rex, is the head of the Nazi party. In fact, he's right now carrying his glass. He's carrying his glass as he's sipping it, and along with it, he's carrying his Mauser for anyone who opposes him.
All my history books are worthless now.
Okay, and that's a good note to bring in Pumpkin, who's calling in. Pumpkin, are you there?
Yep.
Right, do you have a question?
Well, it was more just a quick query. When you were saying earlier, Sarah, about people trying to label your work as, would they call it manga or English specific, that's something that's always kind of irked me, is surely if someone is from whatever background they are, as long as they're doing a form of art in the confines of that way, be it manga, be it Picasso style paintings, be it broad landscapes, it's always going to be that specific style of art. So one of the things I would ask you is, and I'm sorry if you actually addressed this because I've kind of been coming in and out and doing a few things, but what would you say, how would you respond to someone who's trying to add labels onto all of your work?
Yeah, well, like, manga isn't necessary. Well, manga is a style, but it's sort of like a style in the same way that, like abstract painting, is kind of a genre of painting. So within manga, different creators have their own styles. It's not just, drawing people with big eyes and little noses and you're making manga. There is a clear difference between the style of like Miyazaki versus Naruto and the shonen shows that are popular with young boys versus shoujo that are popular with young girls, and so there are styles within manga, and there's certainly the argument is made that like manga is just the Japanese word for comic book. So in Japan, Superman would be called manga, and Batman would be called manga, just because it's their word for comic book, which I'm skeptical of. I think the word comic book is often used in Japan, like they call things komi for like, they have a lot of like English words that they just use in Japanese. But anyways, there is a spectrum of what is considered manga that I think readers like understand. So there's some manga that, yeah, they're more American influenced, and they might not be so stylized in that sort of Pokemon, Sailor Moon, Dragon Ball Z type way that many Westerners are more familiar with. You can get anime series that, you know, like say the Animatrix has art styles that are very like more toned down in their anime style. Also, the movie Kill Bill had an animated sequence that was stylized in an anime way, but it's not, you know, so stylized in a Pokemon type manner. So that's kind of the spectrum within mangas. You can get these very more serious, dark-looking styles, all the way, you know, to you know, Samurai Pizza Cats type cartoons. But there's a market for it, and that's the point. Is with me is there's a market for manga where manga readers are separate, even though there's crossover. There are manga readers that are not comic book fans, that don't go to comic book conventions. They go to anime conventions. And when they go to buy their comics, they're not necessarily going to a comic book store. They're going to their local, like, Barnes and Noble, or, you know, their bookstore or their library, and they're going to the manga section and reading and buying manga. It's a separate market. So it makes sense for me as a creator to label my work so that it will get the attention of those who are most likely to buy and read it. So that's mainly my, you know, that's my intent in labeling my work manga, is it's made for manga fans, where I think some people can get a little snobby, or feel like I'm, you know, just a Japanese wannabe, and
Weeboo.
Yeah, yeah. I got called that and had to look it up one time. Like, what? What's a weeb? What?
Weeboo?
Yeah, and
First time I was called that, I thought it was a great insult to my intellect. And then I looked it up and I found out that, you know, it pretty much is.
You better watch out. You better watch out when you said that, because I'm now having to look both ways to make sure nobody comes out with a paddle and says, "Did somebody say weeboo?"
So, yeah, I think a lot of people can get kind of miffed that they think, like, I'm a Japanophile and that I just want to be Japanese, and that's why I call my work that. But to me, it's a very practical marketing label.
Oh, yes. Go on, actually.
It's just very practical, and that's a marketing term, you know. I feel my work belongs on the manga shelf and wouldn't do as well mixed in with, you know, Iron Man and Thor. And that's basically the only motivation, really, is to try to get it into the hands of readers who are most likely to enjoy it.
And well, also, I think that one thing you should know is that just because... Here's what a weeboo is not. No, it is not a person who pretty much reads mangas. It is not a person who watches who just likes anime. It's not a person who plays Japanese video games. The best to describe it is basically a person who is non-Asian, who shuns their non-Asian culture, and only likes Japan. That's a weeboo, and you are not a weeboo.
No.
Until you added "and likes Japan," the only word going through my head was hipster.
Right. So we do have a chat room question. I think, who should we get to read it out? Kutch, if you can see the chat room question there, you can read it out.
Okay. Which one?
Yeah, the one in our chat room there, I've copied and pasted it in.
Oh, okay. Round. Ask Sarah for a good Ichi anime series.
Sorry, what's that?
This person's looking for some good Ichi anime series. E-H-I. I hope I'm pronouncing that right.
Yeah, I call it ecchi, because I pronounce Japan words phonetically. And so what ecchi means is the letter H in Japanese, like saying the letter H, ecchi. And the letter H is from the word hentai, which is their pornography.
Yeah, I
But
can
it's
see where
just
this is going.
Every guy just went, oh.
But ecchi is just the H from hentai, so it's basically like soft hentai. It's not full hentai. It's just a little bit of hentai. It's just the H from hentai, basically.
So basically what you're saying is this person's looking for porn and all they're getting is a striptease.
I didn't even know there was a scale.
Yeah, so if you're looking for ecchi, it's just sort of like a lot of cute girls and panty shots. There's nothing, there's like no nakedness to it, really. But unfortunately, I'm not like up to date with the anime world, and so I wouldn't have any recommendations on specific series. But just to explain what ecchi is, I can I can do that.
There was one question I wanted to ask when you were talking about like the bleep do we know stuff, and it's a video online I saw where you appear in it when you got to ask Deepak Chopra a question one night.
Yeah.
What was your impression of Deepak?
My impression was that, well, first of all, my question to him was very simple. You know, basically just without science, without the scientific method, how do we distinguish between what is true and what we simply want to be true? And it's sort of expected that he could not answer that his entire, world would just come crumbling down around him if he were to actually answer that. So he danced around it. But I really think that my impression of him is that he really just takes advantage of people's ignorance of certain scientific jargon and concepts, just uses it to his advantage, to sound intellectual. I think it's a common tactic when trying to brand yourself as sort of a guru or an intellectual, is you use language that confuses people. And when people are confused of what you're saying, some of them assume that you must be smarter than them.
So it's circle jerking, in other words.
And yeah, so because real science communicators like your Carl Sagans, Bill Nye, Neil deGrasse Tyson, what they do is they take a complicated subjects and they make them accessible to the general public. So that's a big difference between, someone who's genuinely trying to educate you and someone who's just trying to pass themselves off as an expert or trying to sound intellectual or academic. Real science communicators make it easy to understand what you're saying. I find the same is true with people who are doing any kind of outreach, for example, social justice has been something that a lot of skeptics have come across. You know, people wanting skepticism or secular humanism or atheism to join with social justice causes, and you'll find the same thing with social activists as well. You can tell the difference between real activists who are trying to communicate to people in a clear way, because you want your arguments to be clearly understood by the general population. You know, that's the whole point of outreach. Where you have other so-called social justice warriors that will use language that is meant to confuse people or to sound academic. So they'll use a lot of buzzwords like privilege and cisgendered and you know, apologist, and there's all these social justice buzzwords that they'll use, which serves to confuse people and to sound like they are educated in social justice and gender equality and gender studies. So I think, like, as skeptics, that's what, like, we're pointing out red flags, you know, in science claims. I think when people are simply communicating, that you can kind of point out red flags between when you're seeing someone who's genuinely trying to educate you, which is using, you know, words that you'll understand and using allegory and giving you examples. And then you sort of have the Deepak Chopras of the world that just, like, throw in a mess of words that only serves them. It serves their image of sounding smart. And that's the impression I get from Deepak Chopra, and unfortunately I see, you know, a lot of other people doing that as well.
Yeah, I have a very similar experience, and one piece of advice that I would like to give people is, if you have the opportunity, ask these people to explain their terms, because it's almost like, for me, it's energy, frequency, and vibrations, and waves. Ask them to explain energy. It's like, well, you know, it's the frequency that is emitted from yeah, okay, whoa. What do you mean by frequency? Well, you know, the vibration. Okay, what do you mean by vibration? Well, you know, the energy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like,
circular ass logic.
Yeah. Eventually, they start talk. Either they just switch terms and you feel like, dude, get to the part where you actually define something.
Yeah.
Or they end up getting circular. And then you just, I mean, how hard is it? Frequency, number of occurrences per unit of time. There you go.
Yeah, like a science communicator would say, well, energy is just a measurement. It's not, you know, like it's a...
Yeah, it's the potential of a system to do work.
It's not some sort of, you know, mysterious...
Yeah. It's not the
thing.
Force from Star Wars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's actually where I was thinking.
And of course, vibrations is just something bouncing around going...
Yeah, it's a particle moving back and forth around a point of equilibrium.
It's how many midichlorians you have.
Don't reference that movie.
Well, one thing I would like to say on this topic is there's no saying that has gone through my family several times. We probably stole it from somebody else. But the saying is that any misguided fool can make something more complex and harder to understand, but it takes a determined genius to simplify it to a level that anyone can understand.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it takes a genius to do that.
It's a saying from my
just,
family, or probably someone we stole it from at night point.
yeah, I would
Yeah,
like to.
because that's what every teacher does, you know. So
Well, every good teacher.
yeah, well, yeah.
Okay, Casey, do you have a question there?
Not exactly a question, more like, well, something I should guess explain about. Well, one thing about my family. One part about my family, especially with my mother, one thing that she has a problem with is, well, unlike all of us in here, which can pretty much see the bullshit meter when it comes to things like neuropathy and also homeopathy, she believes all that works, and well, she doesn't trust modern medicine that much. And well,
Okay, all right. Sheila, do you have a question there?
One thing you could do,
Marty.
Casey, is just down a full bottle of homeopathic sleeping pills in front of her.
well,
You're not going to get sleepy, I guarantee it.
Well, would it not make more sense if he was to take some of that sleeping and dilute it down further to strengthen it? Because science.
Oh yeah,
that's how
I
it
mean
works.
they're already so diluted that one pill one pill of caffeine should knock you out, because you know it does the opposite.
If you
But-
don't take it, you'll overdose.
Yeah, exactly.
Does that
Yeah.
mean that if I was to pour a vat of acid and just dilute it down enough, I would become immune to acid? If so,
Yeah,
I
pretty
think I
much.
figured out how Spider-Man really got his powers. He took a spider, dropped it in a bathtub, and drank some of the water.
I guess, but you want to know what I hate more than homeopathy? Traditional medicine, especially like the Chinese traditional medicine, because you know how they work. They'll like go poach a rhino, poach
Tigers and things like that.
deer, poach tigers, and we're discussing that with Sanal.
Well,
Also, like they'll smash up snakes for medicine. Also, Chinese alligators. Basically, all these creatures, even though they have no effect whatsoever. Oh, and don't get me started with bear galls.
Well, I have to give them this much. It's better than homeopathy because at least there's some kind of reasoning behind it. I mean, people have observed that taking certain, ingesting certain substances makes you experience certain effects, and I mean that's true. Now, in those cases, it's obviously the placebo effect, but
Homeopathy's opposite land.
yeah, exactly. Homeopathy.
Bizarre
it's just,
world.
I mean, they're not even taking medicine; they're taking water, and they know it's water, but it's magic water with memory.
It remembers.
Yeah, but
And it remembers your name.
it still shouldn't work because it just should still do the opposite, right? I mean, caffeine does not put you to sleep. But I get why someone took like a rhino horn and ground it up and figured, hey, let's see if this has any healing properties because rhinos are cool.
No, don't forget
They
sharks.
took it and hey, what do you know? My headache went away. Now there's no way to determine if it's from the rhino horn, but that's what got credited.
can I
So
just
at
point
least
something
there's
out?
something there.
Oh yeah, and also don't forget, like shark cartilage. Since I will work at an aquarium, we really promote shark conservation. And one thing that we do acknowledge is that like people will be hunting sharks for cartilage because they say, oh, sharks are immune to cancer. So if
I thought you would hunt sharks because that means you have a badass story to tell others. Yeah, I fucking hunted a shark. Yeah.
Well, that, and also they'll do it in like third world countries because I don't think they will sell this shark cartilage because in order to make a profit, since they based off the belief that sharks don't get cancer after this book that was made in the 90s, though of course they've actually disproven that because I remember looking at Scientific American recently. A great white shark had a tumor on its mouth.
That's a tumor.
I'm sorry, Popeye. Those aren't muscles. Those are tumors. You're going to die in 6 months. Quick question for you, sir. Is there any particular project you're working on that, you know, has captivated you in a certain way, or is it just multiple projects at once?
Actually, what I'm working on right now is completing Legend of the Star Volume 1. I'm hoping for a release date of July, because I am a guest at Comic-Con this year, and so I'd like to have it available for the San Diego Comic-Con in July. Yeah, I'm really excited about doing that, which I'm able to do because of a successful Kickstarter campaign that I had going on in October. So I've raised enough money to work on the project to sort of support my living expenses while I focus on the writing and illustrating, so that I'm not so pressured to rely on freelance client work, and also enough money to fund a print run and produce a full ebook as well. So yeah, so that's my main project that I'm doing right now, which is more than enough because I'm working on chapters 3, 4, and 5 to get out. Probably to do a print run, I'll probably have to get it already for like May and June if I'm gonna do a print run. So it's gonna be sort of a tight squeeze to get that amount of writing and illustrating done by then, especially since I do everything myself up here in Canada. So I'm really excited about it, but it's a lot of work.
Is there anything you're working on for the skeptic community, or at this point are you just kind of focusing on that?
I had been doing monthly manga doodles of science figures that I sort of put on hold during my Kickstarter campaign. Those were quite popular. I would do, February for Darwin's Day, I would draw little manga doodles of Darwin and sign them and send them out to people. But Legend of the Star I actually consider sort of a skeptic project because sort of the philosophy of the storyline is based in skepticism. It's sort of what I would consider like a secular humanist and science-based sort of epic. I'm hoping to kind of, like what Star Trek does for science and secular humanism, I would like to do for skepticism, is you weave the philosophy into the characters and the conflicts that they come across. So I do consider it sort of a skeptical project, but it's not really, beating people over the head with skepticism.
Right.
But it's sort of making a, almost like making a mythology for skeptics, with, that you have a storyline that teaches people about the values of critical thinking. You have antagonists who show the dangers in being true believers and using fallacious arguments, and heroes that show the upside of being, doubtful and skeptical. And I think there's a power in having entertainment and these stories that entertain you and inspire you, and you almost don't realize that you're learning these sort of values.
Yeah.
I've
Sorry. Go
been
ahead, Martin.
bothered by that a lot in fiction, that almost whenever there's this character that is the skeptic and there's the other one who has faith, it's the one who has faith who is the good guy, you know, the protagonist, and he's always the one who turns out to be right in the end. And it pisses me off.
Yeah.
I know, right?
This is flipped. This is a reverse. It shows, you know, the heroes are they get through their conflicts and they get out of trouble by using critical thinking, and the people who get in trouble in the story, it's because, you know, they're using belief and confirmation bias and not valuing looking at the world for what it really is and what you simply want it to be.
Tim Minchin said something about that. Scooby-Doo was really awesome, he said.
Yeah.
I didn't really watch Scooby-Doo ever, but the point was that every time there's a ghost or something, it's actually just a guy in a mask, and that's what you find out at the end of the episode.
Yeah.
And, you know, more and more, well, I don't know if it's more and more, but typically in fiction, it actually is a ghost. It's, you know, the whole point is the main character has to convince everyone else that it's not a guy in a mask.
Yeah.
And I would say that's something that annoys me in all kinds of fiction, especially in films. I can't watch zombie films anymore because I know what will happen. They will go down a dark corridor, they'll hear moaning that they've heard 100 times from zombies, but this time it's a person. And they're going to go down the long deserted corridor alone, open the door, get jumped, bitten, and hide it. And it really is just... I think I was watching... it was one of the Resident Evil films, which would have been good if they hadn't had the Resident Evil tagline, but when I was watching the film, I literally just sat watching the second one with a clipboard and just started ticking that shit off.
I'm not scared of zombies because I live in Canada, and one, there's too much space, so you're never going to get cornered by zombies. Is too big. And then come winter, they're all going to freeze and then be eaten by all our wild animals when they unthaw.
And you also have a third option, which is because there's actual healthcare, not a lot of people will be dead enough.
And I think I know, well, you're in Northern Ireland, so a zombie movie's just like Friday night there, isn't it?
A zombie movie is basically target practice for petrol bombs, yes.
And I'm not afraid of zombies because I live in shotgun land, as I said. You know, Texas, as we call it. If I wanted to,
shotguns require ammo. If you've ever seen any survival horror stuff, you'll know that ammo runs out.
But if you're ever watching just basic horror, it's like the infinite clip that never ends. Run sprinting down a corridor. But my point was that it does annoy me because a lot of these films will just... They follow the same set pieces time and time again because even the audience is shouting, "It's a fucking zombie!" And yet the directors haven't realized that everyone at this stage knows that scenario so well from watching these films that they would just think, yeah, fuck that thing, and walk the other way.
Unless it's a cat. Sometimes it's a cat stuck somewhere, and you're...
Yeah, but then the cat jumps out, and the shot kind of goes away, and they turn around, and there's just a face hugger waiting for them or something.
I was wanting to ask, Sarah, can you give us a general overview of what Legend of Star is about, like the story to it? Also for the people watching, just in case they're not familiar with it.
Yeah, sure. It's the story of a young girl named Adora Star, and she's being recruited by those still loyal to her late father, Kalen Star. And there was a prophecy that the Sword of Star would be the sword that would overthrow the Emperor of the known universe. So she's sort of being recruited by these rebels to take up her father's sword and sort of complete this task that he failed to complete before he died. So it has kind of like a Star Wars vibe to it, where it kind of mixes fantasy themes with science fiction themes, but where the difference in philosophy is that Star Wars was very like sort of belief based, sort of romanticized divinity and theocracy, and more takes a Star Trek philosophy approach in being more secular humanist and science-based in its system of thought. So we sort of have this young, skeptical girl battling amongst the stars with sort of zealous true believers of this emperor who thinks that he's a living god.
And were any of the true believers based on any real life people, or do you want to keep that to yourself?
No, it's basically just, you know, fantasy characters, and it's more about.
No one said anything about bananas, for example.
No.
I was actually gonna say it sounds like more of a giant space version of North Korea.
Yeah. No, it's more about taking, you know, like taking the downsides of belief, like showing characters who are true believers, showing characters who fall into logical fallacy traps all the time, or ones who are aware, you know, they're con artists. They're aware that what they're saying isn't true. And then there's other characters that represent, you know, the kinds of people who have fooled themselves, and they really do believe what they're saying. So yeah, it's not really basing on specific people, but taking these traits and these characteristics of sort of what happens when you don't use doubt and critical thinking.
I have a question, actually. What do you think of the series Death Note? Have you ever watched that one, or?
I have never seen enough of it. I know the general idea of it, and I know it's very popular. But I spend so much time, you know, working as my profession, writing and illustrating manga, that I tend to not watch a lot of today's anime. You can kind of get a bit overwhelmed when, you know, what you do as a living is also your hobby. So my hobbies tend to be non-anime related.
Okay. Who's got a question there? Oh, there's the chat room question.
There's a chat room question.
Yeah, you can ask it, Marty.
Yeah, a question for every one of you. Do you have any hope for a new face in the skeptic/science area? I mean, Dawkins, Hawking, and Randy are great, but they're getting old, and we really need someone to take their places when their time comes. That's a great question, actually. I'm gonna.
Yeah, you go.
Matt Dillahunty, I'm gonna say.
Something about that.
For me, for skepticism, Sanal Maruku. He doesn't get enough coverage, and well, he's been a guest on here and really needs to be promoted more. And he's an incredible mind and an incredible story to tell, and he's just really good at what he's doing. Kitch?
Two. One obvious one, one non-obvious one. I'll start with the obvious one. For people over for this side of the ocean, obviously Brian Cox.
Oh, yeah.
And the non-obvious one is Darrow Breen.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, I was like, no.
Oh, you got two.
Yeah. Because he's done a lot for science through his his organisation of the Talk and Trinity. He's done shows with Brian Cox, and he knows stuff. He's got a degree in physics from college.
There's one other guy I would like to add to Sanal, and that's Michael Nugent. And he is an amazing guy who's just so nice in the way he deals with everyone. Like, he can completely shred someone to pieces in the nicest way possible. I don't know how he manages that. Sheila, that's over to you.
Actually, I don't, but I have a real specific reason why. I have a real issue with kind of hero worshipping any specific person in the movement, and I would rather see more people, rather than looking for a leader, more people just kind of step up and do it themselves. You know what I mean? I don't think we're supposed to be free thinkers, and everybody keeps waiting for someone to show them how to do that. Well, you don't need someone to show you, you just do it. So I think rather than picking a specific person, I'd rather see everyone just doing it.
All right.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree, and
Agree.
My understanding of the question was not so much who should be a leader, it was more who's good at it.
Well, I think those people, the ones that, Randy and Dawkins, and they may not necessarily be trying to be leaders, but they are. I mean, people look to them to see, what's Dawkins going to say next, and it's something of a hero worship. You know what I mean? So. Yeah.
Well, I know what you I know what you mean.
Sarah. Well.
I love Neil deGrasse Tyson, and I think he's great at doing, great work on PBS and science outreach, and he's good at popularizing, with himself on Daily Show and Colbert Report quite often. And I think there's also hope for the future. If I can plug my boyfriend, Kyle Hill, is a great young up-and-coming science communicator. He writes for Scientific American and Wired, Nautilus. Wow. He's Nature. He's done articles in the Boston Globe, and he is a science correspondent on the new Al Jazeera America Network's Techno show, which I think is their number one show on their network. And it's all about, science and technology's impact on communities and individuals and making people's lives better. So he's kind of like young blood that, as the years go by, will turn into these sort of new faces of science and skepticism. And I know there's a lot of colleagues in his world of, young, hip young people looking to communicate science. So there's definitely hope for the future. I know there's a lot of people that people don't know their names yet, but who are young and are going places.
Who's got the next question? I think Casey does, but
Oh, sure, just glance over what I think the next leader of the thing. No, just ignore me.
All right, Pumpkin. Just so you don't feel
all right, Pumpkins.
Yes, feed me. What I would say is, well, people we look up to are important. I don't so much think we need either leaders or figureheads. I think we just need more places to meet and talk and discuss things, because one person standing up on a stage and preaching to an assembled group, that's called a mass, and that's one of the things that I left when I discarded my religion. I think if we have more open discussions with panels of people, like here or in other shows, that's better. Having said that, though, I think I would be a brilliant figurehead because I'm just fantastic and totally, subtle and kind and humble. I mean, I'm the most humble guy in the universe.
That's like your only flaw is how humble you are.
It is. But what a flaw to have. I mean, aside from the raging alcoholism. And the violent tendencies and the profanity.
Everyone, let's follow our friend Pumpkin.
Fear me and obey.
He is our new god of skepticism. And he shall conquer multiverses.
If I'm seeing this right, we do have another caller. Hiya, are you there? No, it's
Glee himself.
Glee, are you there?
Poke it with a stick until it moves.
Yes.
Anyway,
Anyway, Casey, we'll go back to your question while Glee sorts himself out.
Alright. So, Sarah, what do you think is your best pop science magazine or site? For that, and then after that, this is just still a non-important question. What's your most favorite manga site, or pretty much, well, manga channel in general? Well, studio in general.
I really like the two skeptic magazines, Skeptic and Skeptical Inquirer. As far as like science magazines go, and manga again, like I find it hard to keep up with what's new and popular. So like I have series that I follow and that are favorites of mine, but not really like hip to what's like new in the manga world. When I do look for news in the anime world, I usually go to Anime News Network.
I figured.
Because it's obvious. But yeah, I tend not to stay up to date on what's going on just because I get burnt out on it.
I will admit, yes, I do have that feeling because I'm always trying to update all my prehistoric animal books because, well, you know how like science marches on and all. Some of my they say that Tyrannosaurus has feathers. I look at my books. Oh, it doesn't have feathers. Also, the Deinonychuses don't. So I'll have to always keep updating those.
Well, there's a simple way around that. I mean, you could believe in creationism and everything stays the same.
Yeah. Just the problem is, then I'll have to update for every time they say that it turns out that after they get done with saying that Tyrannosaurus ate coconuts, I'm going to have to also learn that they ate radishes, and for that matter, Brussels sprouts.
Okay. Well.
In fairness, though, a vegetarian Tyrannosaurus just isn't scary.
Right, let's try again. Yeah. Glee, are you there? Glee?
Hello, Glee.
He's been eaten by the vegan Saurus Rex.
Glee, are you there now? Okay, still no sign of Glee. This is a question then.
With Avatar.
Sheila, do you have a question there?
Actually, at the moment, no, I don't. You can come back to me.
Okay, Kitch or Marty, we haven't heard from you in a while, so...
Well, I guess maybe you covered this in the beginning. This is one of those insanely stupid questions that demonstrate how little I know about the subject. But I know you talked a little bit about manga being this wide spectrum. So what makes it manga then?
There are a few differences common between manga and, say, your traditional American comic books. Besides just the art differences that people are usually familiar with, the visual differences, not just between, like people think of manga, they think of the big sparkly eyes.
Yeah.
It's not always about big sparkly eyes, but there is more information about the characters' personalities that are woven into the artwork of the character than you would have like in a superhero comic. Big eyes are usually reserved for honest and innocent people who, display childlike personalities. People's eyes will become narrower if they're sort of not to be trusted or are more serious, more adult. So there's more information in the artwork than there would be, say, in a North American comic book. So it's more visual based in how it tells a story. There's usually not a lot of narration in manga. It tends to want to leave things unsaid or to use the artwork to give you information rather than relying on the words.
That sort of strikes me as a bit weird because when if you watch anime, they just never shut up. They have to narrate everything. Like they have to narrate what they're doing even. Despite the fact that you can clearly see what they're doing, but they still have
Captain Obvious.
Yeah.
It's more common with sort of anime cartoons played on TV here for a younger audience. But then you have series like Rurouni Kenshin that are very dark and like very quiet and use mostly the visuals to tell what's going on. There's also a big difference in storytelling. Manga is more based in emotion and in symbolism, and traditional comics tend to be more literal. An example is like an anime character will often like burst into flames because they're angry or they're fired up. But in a comic book, if you're on fire, you're probably actually literally on fire. Like you're either in trouble because you're on fire, or you're hopefully the flaming torch. But in anime, a character can be set on fire, and the readers realize that it's just symbolizing their anger or their fired up energy.
Because
I thought those little cancer swells told you that.
Yeah, so there's a lot more symbolism. If someone gets hit on the nose, all of a sudden they'll have a Band-Aid on their nose out of nowhere. And the readers realize, well, because it's symbolism of being hurt, they haven't, there's no literal Band-Aid.
When they get hit in the head, all of a sudden they have a big tumor.
Yeah. So there's a lot more symbolism and imagery-based storytelling, and American comics are much more literal in their artwork and stories. And then the final big difference would be in the industry, in the actual business of making comic books. The comic book industry is, the big titles are typically owned by the publishing company, and then they hire writers and pencilers and inkers and colorists, typesetters to come together and create the comic. Whereas in the manga industry, the creator owns the title, and the publishers simply have the rights to publish and distribute that series. So you have more creator-driven ownership, and that can have an impact on the types of series you see.
And it has to affect the ability to tell stories in a very positive way. I mean, when you have a bunch of writers, they're not always on the same page.
Yeah.
But when you have one person telling a story, you can tell a story throughout a pretty long time, you know.
It can also affect design.
It also, companies have an interest in keeping a title running. You know, they make money off of the brand Spider-Man, so the series continues, and they want that series to continue and be successful and make money for them, where creator ownership makes it more creator-centric. So it's the creator that can become the brand. So you have, you have a creator make a series, and they will end that series, and then go on and make a new one. And so you're looking for, what's the latest series by, Yu Watase, because I really liked her previous series. So that has an effect on storylines, because characters can die, and there can be a sense of completion and finality, rather than having characters live on forever and ever and ever.
I remember from when I was a kid, I read the G1 Transformers comics, and basically the only time that someone actually died was when there's a new toy line coming out, so we need to get rid of the old ones, and so we can promote the new ones. There has to be a reason like that to kill someone off. That just sucks.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't the layout of manga also different from comic books? Like, a lot of them are laid from right to left instead of from left to right.
Yeah, the Japanese books read right to left. So manga reads right to left. They used to, back in like the 90s and early 2000s, they used to translate them here in North America. Some publishers would flip them so that they would become left to right, but that does sometimes lead to complications in the artwork being flipped. So nowadays they don't bother, they just leave it in its original form, and people just get used to reading comics right to left.
Yeah, I will admit, the first time I looked at a manga, I thought, at the time, now that I think about it, I thought, is this like a book from Bizarro World?
All right, everyone. We are coming up to the end of the show, so we'll just quickly go to Sarah. We'll give you like a minute or so. You can go on your soapbox. Anything you want to publicize.
Yeah, sure. You can follow me on Twitter at Sarah Mayhew. That's SARA, no H, MAYHEW. My website, same thing, sarahmayhew.com, will lead you to my whole sort of online presence. It'll lead you to legendofthestar.com. where you can find out more information about that series. Yeah, and I hope people will stick around in reading that, and looking forward to having the first volume out in print edition and ebook edition. And yeah, and looking forward to being a guest at the San Diego Comic-Con this summer. What else? I guess that's my main big project right now is Legend of the Star. So I hope people keep up to date with that, and follow me on Twitter. You can find me on Facebook and Google+, and I have a Tumblr called Yesterday's Doodles that I post artwork to. So yeah.
Okay, and we'll just go around the panel for the final thoughts. Sheila, and anything you want to shout out as well, because I know you're on another podcast, Sheila.
Yes, you can find me on A News. Yeah, A News is located. You can find us on Facebook. Apartment J, I believe it is apartmentj.com. You can find the podcasts and the articles that we write. I write there. I have a article I'm almost finished for trolling. You can find me on Twitter at Sheila Blackadder. I also have a Facebook page, Feminatheist. You can find me there, or just find me on Facebook, Sheila Blackadder.
Okay.
That's it.
All right, Casey, final thoughts.
Yes, Sarah, you are perhaps, since there's no artists, well, skeptic artists that I know about, I consider you the best one because you're the only one that I so far like.
Thank you.
All right, Kutch.
Major thanks for coming out and being on the show. It's been a pleasure.
All right, Marty.
Yeah, thanks for coming on the show. I won't remember it because I've been working my ass off all day moving, and I'm really tired, and I'm gonna start drinking soon.
All right, I suppose we'll have to ask you, Pumpkin, for your final thoughts.
Entertaining show, even though I came in from nowhere, knowing this sum total of jack and shit about what was going to happen. If anyone's interested in what I do, I've thrown a few comments on YouTube. Angry Pumpkin 1995. I rarely make videos. They're usually terrible, but fuck it, that's all you get.
I would like to say you can catch some of the members of TwL. We're doing a separate podcast that's just started up called the Antimatter Bandits, where we're doing commentaries on some of the not-so-great moments in cinema history, shall we say.
I'm still recovering.
Yeah, last night we did a commentary on Batman and Robin, which Pumpkin sat in on as well. So, yeah.
It has scarred me in ways I never thought possible.
Yeah. We do have
I'm glad I missed it.
Yeah, we do have a website which is under construction. Antimatterbandits.com, and the podcast will soon be updated with the first few commentaries. And I think this week we're going to be doing some more Star Trek Next Generation Season 1 and Battlefield Earth. So,
Battlefield Earth. Sarah, I had a question for you real quick. Somebody else had asked also, where can we find your boyfriend, the stuff he's writing?
Oh, yeah, Kyle Hill. He's on Twitter at Sci-File. That's SCI_PHILE. You can find his blog on Scientific American, which is called But Not Simpler. And he also has a personal blog called Science-Based Life that you'll be able to find all of his work through those places.
Excellent, thank you.
All right. thank you very much, Sarah, for coming along. Thanks to the panel.
Another quick question.
Yeah.
Where can we get your, when it's published and run out, where can we get your stuff that isn't the Pirate Bay?
What?
Where will we be able to actually get... how have I managed to forget the name of the damn thing after all of 5 minutes?
Legend of the Star?
Thank you!
Legend of the Star, you can find out all the ways that you can get it at legendofthestar.com.
Thank you. And apologies for actually managing to forget the name of your manga. Long day, brain damage, etc.
Okay.
Keeping the reputation of us Irish up.
Yes. Okay, once again, thank you everyone for tuning in, and we'll be back next week. Our guest is Mr. Russell Blackford. Looking forward to that one very much. If you do have any further questions for ourselves or Sarah, contact at TwLL.com. We'll forward it to the relevant person to answer for you. So thanks everyone for turning out. Thank you to Sarah once again, and see everyone next week. So have a good rest of the weekend wherever you are.
Toodles.
The introductory question, so I'll hand over to you.
All right. I guess we'll start with the most obvious one. How did you get interested in drawing manga? What drew you into that line? Just basic interest in manga itself, or was there something else that brought you into it?
I've always been interested in storytelling, and I've always had an inclination for drawing. And I would say it was when I was in high school that anime, which is manga's animated counterpart, started becoming more mainstream in North America. So it was around, and I saw this style, and it became appealing to me as an artist of something, just a style to try that was unique and sort of really spoke to me. So I actually got into watching anime and reading manga because I wanted to sort of study it and learn how to draw it myself and learn about how it tells stories. Which is kind of backwards. Usually anime manga fans, if they happen to have any drawing talents, start into making manga by drawing fan art. So I kind of did the opposite. I wanted to draw manga, so I started watching anime to teach myself.
Oh yeah, speaking of anime, I think this might interest you. The Funimation Studios is actually not that far from where I live, because it's just in Flower Mound. In fact, I used to always drive past it when I was going to high school back when I lived in Flower Mound.
Cool.
Right.
Yeah.
There was a question that came off that. Obviously, like being a Westerner foreigner getting into manga, I mean, what's the feedback been like, well, from mangas home in Japan to your work? Have they liked it?
Well, the thing about me being a Westerner doing manga comes up a bit.
Yeah.
Like I noticed in your intro, describing my work as original English language manga, which I don't typically put that sort of extra label on top of my work.
Okay.
My work, I've always just called it manga and refer to myself as a mangaka sometimes even, which is basically just, so the Japanese word for manga creator. And there was actually a debate on my Wikipedia page for a while over labeling my work manga versus, original English language, or there's a bunch of other sort of labels that people have tried to come up with, like global manga, for manga that is, I guess, not from Japan or not from Japanese creators. It gets a little bit of a no true Scotsman fallacy, though, of, well,
And good evening, everyone. It is the 7th of December 2013. It's 7 p.m. in the UK, 2 p.m. Eastern. Hello, everyone in the world, wherever you're watching. This is TwL with Logic, a weekly Skeptics show broadcasting here on Google Hangouts to you. Just to note, you can call in at any time at the Skype contact TwL with Logic to your Skype and just send me a quick PM with a gist of your question, and we'll add you into the conversation in due course. And also, please mute your stream if you do get in, because you'll just get an echo and it'll just confuse everyone on the panel. Also, if you call in, you grant us permission to use your likeness, because the show is recorded and uploaded later. So please, no funny stuff with the DMCAs. And finally, as a copyright disclaimer, this show and the recording is public domain, so you are completely free to share it and distribute it in part or whole. All we ask is, as a nice little courtesy, please link back to us. And I think that's all the announcements done. And we'll just quickly go around the panel. And welcoming back Sheila, how are you doing?
Hey, Cal. I'm doing great, thank you.
And back after another long break, Casey, welcome back to the show.
Glad to be here.
Okay, and so we'll just get on to introducing our special guest tonight. She is a TED Fellow, a graphic artist who works predominantly in English language manga. She's well known for her Legend of Zatar series. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Can everyone please welcome promoter of skepticism and critical thinking through the medium of manga, Sarah Mayhew. Welcome to the show, Sarah.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you. I don't know who's Sheila. You're usually the best with
Japan. So it's really kind of like a negative label. Like, I think any publishers or creators who put this label on their manga, it's like, well, you're only deterring the few weird people who, kind of have this snobbery about only reading manga from Japan. So why would you draw their attention to that fact? Otherwise, I think most readers don't care. They're just looking for this sort of spectrum of attributes that does make it different from your more traditional comic books. So that's basically the only major problem that I've had being a Western artist creating manga.
Okay. Casey, you had a question there.
Yes. All right. I have this one question about this one certain manga. No, it's not none of those ones like Fairy Tail or One Piece. It's this one unorthodox one. Have you ever heard of the? Oh yeah, it's called the Bible manga. It's popular in the Philippines. Basically, it shows anime Jesus at the front. Actually, Jesus at the front. I was wondering. Since you're a manga artist and all, did you ever know about that?
No, but one thing that I have noticed about manga is, it seems that if there's any kind of fandom, and I don't know if you want to call the Bible a fandom, but I guess it's an old one. I guess that's where canon comes from. Originally, if you're Japanese but you're living in Norway, is what you're doing manga. If you're Italian but you live in Japan, is that manga? So basically, I refer to my work as manga as a practical sort of marketing term, because I know that what I'm doing will appeal to a certain demographic of readers who read manga as opposed to reading, traditional American comic books like your Marvel, DC, Dark Horse. There's certainly crossover between the North American comic book market what you would typically call just comic books and what is referred to as manga.
Okay.
So I just call my work manga, even though I'm not Japanese or living in Japan, because I know that there are people who, you know, when they go into the bookstore, they go to the manga section and they're looking for a sort of spectrum of comic book that falls into a label of manga. And I don't really see any appeal or any practical use for putting sort of an extra label on top of the word manga, like original English language or global manga, because there really isn't a market for that. There is no market of people who are like, I want to read manga, but only if it doesn't come from